Jax's revenge domain. I stood on the control room catwalk, the heat from the processing units rising like a furnace beneath me, while the owner handed me a termination letter. He laughed, thinking he'd just saved the company some money. He didn't realize he was standing over a chemical time bomb that only I knew how to defuse. So instead of begging, I cut the SCADA controls and turned his inheritance into the world's most expensive paperweight. My name's Brian Thompson. I'm 48 years old, and I've been keeping Coastal Petroleum Refinery running for 25 years. You don't just work in a refinery, you survive it. Every day, you're dancing with chemicals that could kill you in a dozen different ways. The smell of sulfur and hydrocarbons gets into your clothes, your hair, your soul. But it pays the bills, and in my case, it was supposed to pay for my son's engineering degree and my wife's medical treatments. For 25 years, I had survived this place. I knew the rhythm like I knew my own heartbeat. The constant hum of the distillation units, the hiss of steam valves, and the deep rumble of the main processing tower that sat at the center of everything like a hungry giant. It was a Tuesday morning, and the ambient temperature was already pushing 95 degrees. I wiped sweat and grime from my forehead with a rag that had been white when I bought it, but was now permanently gray. "Pressure holding steady at 850, Brian," Timothy called from the crane control booth 40 feet above me. Timothy was good people, quiet and careful, respectful of the danger we lived with every day. He was one of the few young guys who actually listened when the old-timers talked about safety. "Copy that, Timothy," I replied, my voice rough from breathing petrochemical vapors for 25 years. "Keep it steady. We've got 200 tons of volatile soup cooking in there. If the flow stops for more than 15 minutes, we lose the whole batch." I walked the perimeter of the main distillation unit. It was a massive steel tower, 80 feet tall, glowing with heat shimmer from the chemical reactions inside. Crude oil, additives, and catalysts were being processed at nearly 800 degrees Fahrenheit. It was controlled chaos, and it was my job to keep it that way. I wasn't just a shift supervisor. I was the plant operations manager. I knew every valve, every sensor, every bolt in this facility. I knew that Pump Station 3 had a slight vibration when the humidity got above 80%. I knew that the east cooling tower made a different sound when a storm was coming. But lately, the atmosphere had changed. The air felt heavier, and it wasn't just the weather. Old Man Walsh, the founder, had died 8 months ago. He was tough, but fair. He understood that cutting corners in a refinery could kill people. His nephew, Jeffrey Walsh, understood nothing but quarterly reports. Jeffrey had inherited the company and immediately started bringing in consultants, efficiency experts, people who thought running a refinery was like managing a coffee shop. I looked up toward the air-conditioned offices that overlooked the plant floor. Through the tinted glass, I could see figures in suits, clean hands, people who thought petroleum products were made by clicking buttons in spreadsheets. They called it the Ivory Tower. We called it something else. "Brian," a voice said behind me. I turned to see Sarah, our new safety compliance officer. She was young, ambitious, and carried her clipboard like it was a weapon. Her hard hat looked like it had never deflected anything harder than office fluorescent lights. "We need to talk about the emergency protocols on Unit 7, she said, not meeting my eyes. "There's some irregularities in the maintenance logs." "The protocols are fine, Sarah," I said, pointing toward the main control panel. "I personally checked every safety valve last week. They're all within spec." "My report says otherwise," she muttered, scribbling something down. Her hands were shaking slightly. Her eyes kept darting toward the ivory tower. That sick feeling hit my stomach. When you've worked industrial for 25 years, you develop a sense for trouble. Usually it's a pressure alarm or the smell of something burning. Today, the warning sign was Sarah acting like she'd seen a ghost. "Just fix whatever needs fixing, Brian," she said, backing away. "And be extra careful today." She walked away fast, almost running. I watched her go, a cold feeling settling in my gut that had nothing to do with the morning air conditioning. Something was wrong. The plant was loud, screaming with industrial noise, but suddenly I felt very alone. I checked my watch, 10:15 a.m. The main unit was at peak processing. The SCADA system was managing flow rates, temperature controls, and chemical mixing ratios automatically. Everything was running smooth. My phone buzzed, text from my wife Lisa. "Mark's tuition bill came today, $18,000 for fall semester. Hope your meeting with management goes well." My stomach tightened. Lisa had been fighting cancer for 2 years. The treatments were expensive, even with insurance. Mark was starting his engineering degree at State next month. Smart kid, wanted to follow in my footsteps but do it right, get the education I never had. Between Lisa's medical bills and Mark's college costs, we needed every penny of my pension and benefits. The summons came 15 minutes later. The intercom crackled over the roar of the processing units. Brian Thompson, report to control room catwalk immediately. Brian Thompson to the catwalk. Not the office. The catwalk. The metal bridge that ran directly over the main distillation unit. It was the loudest, hottest, most dangerous place in the entire facility. Nobody held meetings there unless they wanted privacy or they wanted to intimidate someone. I looked up through the metal grating. Standing on the catwalk, 60 feet in the air, were two figures silhouetted against the morning sky. Even from this distance, I recognized the expensive cut of an Italian suit, Jeffrey Walsh. Next to him stood his cousin Daniel Walsh, a man who'd been appointed efficiency director despite never working a day outside an air-conditioned office. "Timothy, you seeing this?" I tapped my headset. "I see them, boss," Timothy replied from his crane cab, voice low. "They're looking down at you like kids watching an ant farm. Watch your back. Keep that crane steady, Timothy. Don't let anything drift while I'm gone." I began the climb. The stairs were steep, made of diamond plate steel that clanged under my work boots. Each step took me higher into the rising heat and chemical vapors. By the second flight, the air was thick and tasted of sulfur compounds. By the third flight, the temperature had jumped 15 degrees. My knees ached. At 48, my body was a roadmap of 25 years in heavy industry. Burn scars, cut marks, and joints that protested every morning. I had missed anniversaries, birthdays, and school plays to keep this place running. I had saved this facility from equipment failures, chemical spills, and cost-cutting executives who thought safety equipment was too expensive. I had slept in the break room during Hurricane Rita to make sure the emergency systems stayed online, and now they wanted to throw me away like a used filter. I reached the top landing and stepped onto the catwalk. The heat was crushing up here, pressing against my chest like a weight. Below us, through the heavy grating, I could see the orange glow of the processing unit's heat exchangers. The main distillation tower hummed with controlled violence. Thrum hum, the heartbeat of liquid fire. Jeffrey was leaning against the safety railing, looking bored. He held a silk handkerchief over his nose to block the smell. Daniel was tapping on his tablet, probably playing games. Neither of them was wearing proper safety equipment. No heat-resistant clothing, no breathing protection, no safety harnesses. They had no respect for where they were standing. "Brian!" Jeffrey shouted over the industrial roar. He didn't offer a handshake. He didn't smile. "Thanks for coming up. Great view from here, don't you think?" "Jeffrey," I nodded, keeping my voice steady. "You picked one hell of a place for a conversation. It's 120 degrees up here, and those fumes will give you a headache in 5 minutes." "We like the view," Daniel smirked, finally looking up from his screen. He had the soft face of someone who slept until noon and never missed a meal. "It really gives you perspective on our operational overhead. Is there a problem with the processing run?" I asked, wiping sweat from my eyes. "Because if not, I need to be down there monitoring the catalyst ratios. We're in the middle of a delicate separation process." Jeffrey pushed off the railing and stepped closer, invading my personal space. He smelled like expensive cologne and entitlement. "The processing run is fine, Brian. The problem is you." I stiffened. "Excuse me?" "We've been reviewing the numbers," Jeffrey said, gesturing vaguely around the plant. "The legacy costs, the pension obligations, the old ways of doing things." His voice carried that particular arrogance of someone who inherited wealth instead of earning it. "The old ways are why this place hasn't exploded," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "I run a safe operation. We haven't had a reportable incident in 3 years." "You run an expensive operation," Daniel corrected, still pecking at his tablet. "And according to the safety report filed by Sarah this morning, you're also running a negligent one." I felt the blood rush to my face. That report is garbage. Sarah doesn't know a pressure relief valve from a temperature sensor. She's been here 6 weeks. "It's an official document," Jeffrey said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a folded piece of legal paper. "Gross negligence, multiple safety violations, insubordination." Each word was pronounced clearly, like he was savoring them. I looked at the paper but didn't take it. I knew what it was. "You're firing me? Now? In the middle of a 200-ton processing run?" Jeffrey laughed. It was a cold sound that somehow cut through the industrial noise. "Oh, please, Brian. It's all automated. It runs itself." Daniel here has the operations manual. I looked at Daniel. The kid was sweating through his shirt, flinching every time a steam valve popped below us. He was terrified of the sparks flying up from the heat exchangers. He didn't have a manual. He barely had the spine to be standing where he was. "You have no idea what you're doing," I warned them both. "This isn't a video game. These are industrial chemicals under pressure. If something goes wrong down there, people die. I know exactly what I'm doing," Jeffrey said. His smile was cruel, practiced. "I'm cutting costs." He shoved the termination letter against my chest. I grabbed it instinctively before it could blow away and incinerate in the heat rising from below. "You're fired, Brian," Jeffrey announced, the words sharp and clear despite the chemical plant cacophony. "Effective immediately. Termination for cause, which means—" He paused, clearly enjoying this moment, "which means we're avoiding your pension and your severance package. 25 years of contributions, gone." The world seemed to stop. The roar of the distillation unit faded to a dull buzz. 25 years. I thought about Lisa's oncology bills, the treatments she needed that insurance only partially covered. I thought about Mark's tuition, his dreams of becoming an engineer. I thought about the small house we'd been paying off, the retirement we'd been planning, gone in an instant. Stolen by a man in a $4,000 suit who was sweating through his designer shirt. "You're firing me for cause based on a fabricated report," I said slowly, my voice unnaturally calm. "Based on proper documentation," Daniel said, finally finding some courage. "It's all legal. Our corporate attorneys made sure of it. Now get off my catwalk." Jeffrey waved dismissively toward the stairs. "Security will escort you out. Leave your badge, keys, and company property on the desk downstairs." I looked at the termination paper in my hand. Then I looked down through the metal grating at the main processing unit. 200 tons of crude oil derivatives flowing through a maze of pipes and reaction chambers, worth millions in finished products. Right now it was liquid gold, flowing because the SCADA computer system was controlling every aspect of pressure, temperature, and chemical mixture. If those controls failed, if the automated systems went offline, everything would shut down hard. The chemical reactions would stop mid-process, and the flowing liquids would start to solidify in the pipes like concrete setting in a mold. "You want me to leave immediately?" I asked, my voice strangely calm. "Right now," Jeffrey barked. "Get out of my refinery." I looked at him one final time. He was already checking his phone, bored with destroying my life. He had no respect for the physics of the world he'd inherited. He thought money was the only power that mattered. "Okay," I said. "I'm leaving." I walked over to the SCADA control station at the end of the catwalk. It was the emergency override terminal, a reinforced steel cabinet that controlled the main automated systems for the entire plant. Inside was a large red button under a clear plastic safety cover, labeled Master System Override. Emergency shutdown only. "What are you doing?" Daniel asked, stepping back nervously. He could sense something was wrong, but didn't understand what. Shutting down my workstation, I lied, my voice completely calm. Standard safety procedure when leaving a shift. I looked at Jeffrey one last time. He was checking his phone messages, already bored with destroying my life. He thought firing me was the end of the story. He had no idea it was just the beginning. I flipped up the plastic safety cover. The red button sat there, waiting. 25 years of experience told me exactly what would happen when I pressed it. Every automated system in the plant would shut down instantly. Every pump, every flow control valve, every temperature regulation system would stop. The chemical processes that were currently flowing like rivers would suddenly have nowhere to go. "Goodbye, Jeffrey," I said. I slammed my palm down hard on the emergency shutdown button. Clunk. The sound was mechanical and absolutely final. Below us, the rhythmic hum of the processing unit stopped instantly. The vibration in the floor that had been constant for 25 years suddenly ceased. The silence that followed was terrifying, not peaceful quiet, but the breathless void where a living monster used to breathe. "What did you do?" Jeffrey screamed, spinning around as the familiar plant sounds died. "Why did everything stop?" "I'm leaving," I said, starting toward the stairs. "I'm taking my expertise with me." "Turn it back on," Daniel yelled, pointing at the control panel like it was a bomb. "Can't," I replied, pulling out my lockout kit, a heavy red padlock and warning tag from my belt. "I don't work here anymore, remember? Unauthorized personnel aren't allowed to operate safety equipment." Company policy. I snapped the padlock through the hole in the shutdown button, locking it in the off position. In the industrial world, a lockout tag is sacred law. It means do not touch under penalty of federal regulations. That switch was now mechanically locked until the owner of that padlock, me, decided to remove it. "Give me the key," Jeffrey demanded, grabbing my arm. I looked at his soft hand on my work shirt, then up at his panicked face. "You fired me, Jeffrey. I'm no longer an authorized operator. For safety reasons, I'm locking this out until you find my replacement." I pulled my arm free easily. Wouldn't want any accidents while you're looking for someone qualified. I held up the small brass key, then dropped it into my shirt pocket. "This is personal property now." Jeffrey looked at the red padlock like it was a venomous snake. "You're fired. You can't be here." "I'm going," I said, "but this key leaves with me." I turned my back on them and started down the stairs. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Every instinct screamed at me to go back, unlock the system, save the process, but I forced my legs to carry me toward the plant floor. "If you walk away," Jeffrey roared behind me, "I'll sue you for everything you own. I'll destroy you." I paused at the top of the stairs and looked back. "You already took my pension, Jeffrey. You can't steal what I don't have. But you do have 200 tons of liquid chemicals in those pipes. I'd suggest you find a qualified operator fast. They start getting chunky in about 20 minutes. I descended the stairs step by step, listening to the refinery die around me. Usually the air around the processing units was filled with the controlled chaos of industrial production. Hissing steam, humming pumps, the constant background roar of controlled chemical reactions. Now the only sounds were emergency alarms starting to wail and the frantic shouting of Jeffrey and Daniel above me. As I reached the mid-level inspection platform, I could already see what was happening through the viewing port. The main distillation unit was still hot, but without the computer-controlled flow systems, the chemical streams were beginning to back up. Petroleum products are finicky beasts. At 800 degrees, they flow like water. But when the flow stops, when the pressure changes, when the temperature distribution gets uneven, they start to change. I could see a thin film beginning to form on the surface of the liquid in the main separator, a gray scum that looked harmless but was actually the beginning of the end. Without constant circulation, the heavier compounds were settling. The lighter fractions were separating out. The careful chemical balance that kept everything liquid was breaking down. "Brian!" Timothy's voice crackled in my headset. He'd climbed down from his crane and was standing on the main floor, looking pale. "Boss, the flow meters are all reading 0. The temperature gauges are starting to spike in some areas and drop in others. What the hell is happening?" "I've been terminated, Timothy," I said, stripping off my heat-resistant work gloves as I reached the bottom of the stairs. Jeffrey decided he didn't need my services anymore. Cut my pension, too. Timothy's jaw dropped. "He fired you? In the middle of a processing run? Brian, the batch is going to solidify. If those chemicals harden in the pipes, we'll never get them out. The pressure alone could crack the main tower." "I know," I said, tossing my gloves onto a nearby workbench. "But I'm not authorized to fix it anymore." I looked up at the catwalk where Jeffrey was now screaming into his cell phone, probably calling lawyers or consultants or anyone who might tell him how to undo what I'd just done. "Listen to me carefully, Timothy. Do not touch that lockout. If anyone orders you to cut it, you tell them you're not certified for emergency system override. Do not let them make this your fault." Timothy nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of what was happening. "The whole batch is going to turn to concrete, isn't it?" "Probably," I said. 200 tons of the stuff. It'll be like trying to chisel out the inside of a mountain." I looked at the massive processing tower one last time. It was a $30 million piece of equipment, and I had just given it a terminal diagnosis. The walk from the production floor to the locker room felt like a funeral procession. Behind me, I could hear more alarms starting up as the automated systems detected the abnormal conditions. The plant's computer brain was trying to figure out why everything had suddenly stopped, but without human intervention, it was helpless. I pushed through the double doors into the locker room. It smelled of industrial soap and old coffee. I went to locker 247. I'd had the same number for 15 years. I didn't rush. I wanted to be deliberate about this. I took my framed photo of Lisa and Mark from the shelf. I took my spare work boots. I took my coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Dad," a Father's Day gift from Mark when he was 12. I left the company manuals. I left the process improvement reports I'd written. I left the keys to the chemical storage areas on the bench where they belonged. "Brian." I turned around. Big Anthony Kowalski, the union steward for the floor crew, was standing in the doorway. He was a mountain of a man, hands permanently stained with grease and work. Word's spreading fast. Jerry from maintenance is telling people you sabotaged the plant. Jerry's wrong, I said, zipping up my duffel bag. I was terminated. I followed safety protocol and locked out my station before leaving. If Jeffrey wants to run the plant, he can figure out how to run it himself. Anthony looked at my bag, then at my face. He could see the controlled anger in my eyes. They really cut your pension? Every penny. Anthony spat on the concrete floor. 25 years down the drain. Then let the whole place turn to stone for all I care. He paused. You need me to walk you out? Make sure security doesn't get stupid? I can handle myself, Anthony. But do me a favor. Keep the crew away from Unit 7. When those chemicals start hardening, the pressure sensors are going to get confused. The system might try to force flow through blocked pipes. Could blow some gaskets. I'll pull everyone back, Anthony promised. We'll take a very long lunch break. As I walked toward the exit, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out and dialed a number I'd memorized years ago. Will, it's Brian Thompson. I need to cash in that favor. William Peterson, everyone called him Will, ran a small forensic engineering firm downtown. We'd served together on a safety committee years back, and he owed me for covering his equipment costs during a difficult investigation. Brian, Will's voice was concerned. You sound like you just walked through hell. Walked out of a job, I corrected. Jeffrey Walsh fired me an hour ago, mid-shift with 200 tons of chemicals in process. He fired you during a run? That's insane. Gets worse. He cut my pension and severance, claiming negligence. But Will, something felt wrong about the whole thing. For the past 2 weeks, Jeffrey's been obsessed with the emergency pressure relief system on Unit 7. Why would a CEO care about specific safety valves unless he wanted them to fail? Will was quiet for a moment. You think he was planning something? I think he needed me gone before he triggered it. A gas explosion during normal operations would look like equipment failure or operator error. But if I was there, I would have seen the pressure spikes coming and hit the emergency systems. Insurance fraud, Will said. Big facility like that, probably insured for what, 50 million? Try 75 million. And get this, he just increased the coverage last month. Brian, when you locked out that system, you didn't just save your own reputation. You might have preserved evidence. If he rigged those relief valves and they're now trapped in solidified chemicals, they can't destroy the evidence without industrial mining equipment, I finished. Will, I need a lawyer, the kind that eats guys like Jeffrey for breakfast. 3 hours later, I was sitting in the downtown office of Jennifer Martinez, corporate litigation specialist. She listened to my story, took detailed notes, and smiled like a predator who'd found fresh prey. Mr. Thompson, she said, if your theory is correct, Jeffrey Walsh is in a very difficult position. To collect insurance for the shutdown damage, he'll have to allow forensic investigation. To hide evidence of sabotage, he'd have to somehow dispose of 200 tons of hardened chemical concrete without anyone noticing. Can we get a court order to preserve the evidence? I asked. Already drafting it, she said, pulling out legal documents. Emergency injunction for evidence preservation. Workplace endangerment and whistleblower retaliation. That solidified mass is about to become Exhibit A. We served the papers the next morning. Jeffrey was standing next to Unit 7 with an insurance adjuster gesticulating wildly. When he saw me walking up with Jennifer and the process server, his face went white as printer paper. You, he hissed. Security, touch him and you'll be in federal custody, Jennifer said sharply. She handed Jeffrey the court order. This facility is now a crime scene. Unit 7 is sealed pending investigation. Crime scene? Jeffrey sputtered. It's a mechanical failure. It's potential evidence of insurance fraud, Will said, introducing himself to the adjuster. We have reason to believe the pressure relief system was tampered with prior to the emergency shutdown. The insurance adjuster's demeanor changed instantly. Nothing focuses an insurance investigator's attention like the possibility of fraud. Mr. Walsh, I'm placing a hold on all claims pending forensic analysis. We'll need to bring in core drilling equipment. You can't drill it? Jeffrey panicked. It's 200 tons of concrete. The cost would be enormous. Then it stays exactly where it is, I said calmly, as a monument to your business ethics. The drilling team found exactly what we suspected. 4 pressure relief valves had been bypassed with manual overrides. A remote-controlled incendiary device had been wired into the main gas feed line. The timer showed it was set to trigger at 11:45 p.m. the following Tuesday, right during peak night shift operations. Jeffrey and Daniel were arrested 48 hours later. The bank froze all company assets pending the criminal investigation. The insurance company not only denied all claims but filed suit for attempted fraud. 6 months later, I stood in the same parking lot watching the asset liquidation auction. The refinery was dead, but somehow the silence felt clean. The equipment I'd maintained was being sold to other facilities where it might find new life. "How are you doing, Brian?" Jennifer asked, walking up with Will. Good, I said honestly. Better than good, actually. The court settlement had been substantial. Full pension restoration, back pay with interest, and significant damages for wrongful termination and whistleblower retaliation. Not rich money, but enough. Mark was finishing his first semester at engineering school. Lisa's treatments were going well, and her latest scans looked promising. "What about Unit 7?" I asked, pointing to the massive concrete-filled tower. Will laughed. "The county's keeping it as an industrial heritage site. They're calling it the Evidence Vault. Apparently it's too expensive to demolish and too interesting to ignore." I looked at the tower one last time. My unintentional monument to the power of expertise and the danger of underestimating working people. It's been 2 years now. Jeffrey got 8 years in federal prison. Daniel cooperated with prosecutors and got probation, but his reputation is destroyed. I didn't retire rich, but I retired right. I spend my time fixing small engines for neighbors, fishing with Mark on weekends, and taking Lisa to her checkups. The real lesson isn't about revenge. It's about respect. When you treat people's knowledge and experience as disposable, when you think expertise is just an expense to be cut, you're playing with forces you don't understand. Your expertise is your power. Document everything. Know your allies. And remember, sometimes the best way to fight corruption isn't with lawyers or politicians. It's with the professional knowledge they can never take away from you. Sometimes the most powerful weapon against corporate greed isn't a lawsuit or a protest. It's the quiet expertise of someone they underestimated walking away with the keys to their kingdom. They thought they were firing an expensive employee, but they were actually handing a loaded gun to the one person who knew exactly where to aim it.